Welcome everyone to another quick tutorial on understanding cyber threats. I'd really like to look at the letter D because D is for a denial of service attack or a DOS attack. I think that the very first documented DOS attack refers to a cyber incident in July 1999 at the University of Minnesota. I believe their entire network was infected with a malicious script called Trino. 20 years later, and DOS are one of the most common and one of the most difficult types of attacks to address. So what actually is a denial of service attack? A DOS attack occurs when legitimate users can't access resources because of the actions of a malicious adversary. Services that no longer work and you wish they did include things like email, websites, online accounts, and employees not being able to remotely work. So how does it work? A denial of service is accomplished by flooding a targeted machine with just so much traffic, so much data that it simply can't respond and crashes, and that prevents other users from accessing services. DOS attacks cost organizations both time and money because critical resources and services quickly become inaccessible. Imagine owning a website which you rely on to sell all your products, and then that website going offline. So what are the most common type of attacks? There are so many different DOS attacks, it's really hard to cover them all, but I'll give you two illustrative examples. One type of attack is called a Smurf attack. Now, in this attack, the hacker asks the targeted computer whether they're experiencing any sort of communication problems and whether it can receive data. Now, this is known as an ICMP or a ping request. The attack is successful because the attacker will generate hundreds, if not thousands, of these ping requests from fake systems, and the targeted machine crashes when it tries to respond to them. Another attack is called a SYN flood. Now, in this attack, the adversary asks the target machine whether it's happy to connect, like you would when you connect to a website and you start sharing data. Now, this connection process requires three distinct steps to take place, known as a three-way handshake. But the attacker's machine never completes the steps. Instead, it sends more and more requests to connect, leaving the targeted machine in some sort of metaphorical limbo and unable to respond to legitimate users. A final sort of type of attack I want to talk about is called a distributed denial of service attack, or a DDoS. A DDoS attack occurs when there are lots of machines called bots working together to attack a targeted system. And that big picture represents that idea beautifully. Now, all those laptops, or these bots, sometimes called zombies, represent hijacked computers. And in this case, these hijacked machines are probably as much a victim as the target of the DDoS. However, cybercriminals can also hire bots if they lack the necessary skills to seize their own. DOS allows for so many more requests to be sent to the target that the attack power is dramatically increased. It also makes it very difficult to attribute the source of the attack because the identity of the hacker is hidden. So how do you know if a DOS attack is happening on your network? Well, symptoms of a DOS attack can sometimes resemble non-malicious availability issues. However, you will probably find that your network slows right down so that opening files becomes a nightmare or websites just kind of hang. But there are lots of different solutions to some of these problems. Let's have a look at a few of them though. So the first thing that you can do if you're perhaps a network administrator is to harden anything that is exposed or vulnerable online, any public-facing service. And this means using strong baselines that have been recommended by the manufacturing vendors and industry best practice. Typically, you're looking at the removal of unused services, default credentials, applying patches, vulnerability testing, that sort of thing. You can also contact your internet service provider to ask if the outage is on their end or if their network is actually the target of the attack and you're some sort of indirect victim. In either case, they may be able to give you advice. Perhaps the best idea is to enroll in a DOS protection service, and this will detect abnormal traffic flows and redirect them away from your network. The DOS traffic is kind of filtered out and all the clean traffic is passed on to you. It's also possible for administrators to monitor their own network traffic to confirm the presence of an attack. Firewalls and intrusion detection systems are really helpful here. You can use these to identify the source of the attack and then mitigate the situation by applying rules and dropping particular traffic. It's just as important to configure firewalls to block as a minimum inbound traffic from private IP addresses, loopback, unassigned DHCP clients, multicast, and anything else listed in RFC 5735. You could deploy something called a content delivery network, or a CDN. This is where all your important web pages are cached on servers distributed around the country or even distributed around the world. That way, if one server is attacked, the others are still up and running. Additionally, because the site content is stored on servers closer to the end user, load time can be significantly faster. You should also consider scaling. Now, in a cloud environment, it's possible to scale your applications and all the infrastructure supporting it to cope with a DOS attack. Now, sometimes this is done automatically, and sometimes it's something that you can do from an online portal. But be warned that A, scaling up can cost a lot of money in the cloud, and B, you might have to negotiate the limits with the cloud vendor so you don't hit any unforeseen ceilings or kind of trigger any hidden contractual clauses. In private data centers, some level of optimized scaling is possible using modern virtualization, but this is going to require you to have some spare hardware capacity to deal with the additional load, and that can be a little bit expensive. It's also very important to create a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan. Now, a business continuity plan is designed to keep your businesses up and running in the face of a problem, like a DDoS attack or an IT attack. And a disaster recovery plan is all about recovering your services after a problem. Now, for BCP, you're going to have to think of all sorts of workarounds to keep your business going. And that might mean that you have to use multiple service providers or an alternative cloud company to support your operations. It might mean that you have to communicate with employees using an out-of-bound communication method. It might mean that you accept some sort of graceful degradation of services, whereas your disaster recovery plan is all about efficient communication and mitigation strategies and recovery strategies to get over this type of attack. One thing I really want to point out, though, is if you are attacked, do not lose sight of the other hosts, assets, or services residing on your network. Many hackers conduct a DOS or a DDoS attack to deflect attention away from their intended target, and they use the opportunity to conduct secondary attacks and other services within your network.